Hi guys, today we're gonna discuss about how I use my racks or what is my go-to rack and what I achieve with it. Right. So here I have an example of a track which I'm currently working on. I had just started some time back. Let me just give you a little preview of it and then we can dive into this and see what we'll be doing with it. Now let's take a look at what exactly is a track or a rack which I kind of use. So as you can see on the screen, currently I'm highlighting my hats track, I think. Yep. And this is having this preamp, equalizer, compressor, and a sidechain chain. And you can see that this whole chain of effects is always there on my plugins, on my tracks, my bad. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see on the bass, the glitch, the kick, and everything else. So as soon as I right click and open a new MIDI track or an audio track, this is how my default tracks look like. They have a preamp, a EQ, a compression board, and a sidechain, right? The main goal of using this whole chain of effect is a couple of goals which I want to achieve with my sounds. First of all, being they should be precise to what I'm doing. Like for example, a compressor, they shouldn't add any color. They should compress the sound. Coloring compressor is not something which I use too often. For coloring, I have a preamp which also can control the dynamic range. So a preamp which kind of sounds a little bit hardware, but also at the same time can achieve a warm saturation. It adds a little bit of warmth to your whole sound. EQ, which is again transparent, which is able to do multiple things inside the EQ itself. And finally, the sidechain, which is just like a workflow hack so that I don't have to always open and bring a new sidechain from the browser. So we're going to talk about the preamp now and what is it doing in this track and what does it do generally. So let's take an example of the kick here and just solo this and let's see what the preamp can do. So the main goal of the preamp is to add a little bit of color but also to make your sound feel a little bit warm. It gives them a tape-like compression, saturation, and not a digital sort of a saturation, just to increase a little bit of color in them. So if I open my preamp here, we have two different kinds of preamps which I use. One being Prebox and the next one being Konsol. So Prebox by Analog's Obsession and Konsol as well by them. Shout out to them for making such amazing tools. So let's see what it's doing. I'm just gonna open a spectrum to explain much better. Right, so we have a spectrum right after everything, and we have the Prebox. So this is how the kick looks like without the Prebox on the frequency spectrum. Right, I'm just gonna maybe put it in one shot so we can listen to the whole kick. So you can see it's mostly a dominant force in the lows and the subs, which is for sure because it's a kick. Now let's turn on the preamp and the Prebox and see what happens. So right now there's not much happening, and let's see what the tool looks like and what it's capable of doing. So we're having a high pass filter and low pass here. We have the bypass, which is on and off, and we have the input and the output. That means the input amount which you want to feed in to the pre-amplifier. That means how much signal level is going into the preamp, and output is the output gain, which we kind of can get through this. The main advantage of having Prebox is I get to choose among 11 different type of preamps, which are emulations of hardwares I'll put down a list somewhere in the video around that which ones are being used here, because these names are not exactly the names of which there are. So let's see what it can do. So as soon as I start putting the input knob up, you can see there's a certain change in the character or the tone of the kick, but it's not too crunchy, too harsh. It's just the right amount of, subtle distortion and saturation to it, which is exactly what I look for when I'm saturating my sounds. And you can also see at different kind of settings how it kind of acts. So you have all 11 kinds of preamps, and let's see how it kind of sounds. So the sixth one actually is bringing out a lot of good flavor from my kick, and I can totally use this if I want. And that's kind of it with the Prebox, and the same thing goes with Konsol. Usually I use one of these things at a time. And here we have the Konsol, which is also a preamplifier. So again, we have 3 settings and a low shelf and a high shelf here. So we can increase the lows a little bit, decrease the highs maybe, and just check out these 3 modes. So you can see the gray model is a little too harsh, and blue and the black are a somewhat subtle kind of a tone they are providing. But it creates a very fuller kind of a kick drum rather than, having like a thin kick drum. Let's just bring down the kick's volume and just turn on and off the preamp and see how it sounds. So it definitely adds a very nice touch and a tone to the whole sound, which I personally like too much. And this you can use on pretty much all the sounds which you want to enhance a little bit or color the whole sound. And yep, that's kind of the task which my preamp kind of does. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the equalizer, and I'm going to use the bass line for this example, and this is how it sounds. And I use Meldaproduction's MEqualizer for most of my jobs. Right, so first things first, it's a 6-band EQ. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you right click on any of the bands, you get the option to change it to one of the filter settings, which has pretty much everything: band pass, low pass, notch, and yep. Right, so what can it do? So first things first, you have the basic capabilities to push things up and down, but you can also look at a sonogram. So this lets you help visually see where and which frequencies are kind of dominant in your particular sound or a track, right? So I can tell, like, over here in the low mids or the low frequency is where my kind of bass line is too heavy, apart from the fact that subs is also there. And let's take a look into areas. If you click on this, you get to go to frequencies, which is like a graphical representation of how much band of frequency does the space control. So sub bass is somewhere below 80 hertz, and until 200 hertz you have the bass, then low mids. So now let's take a look, and you can easily tell that my bass line is residing somewhere till the low mids, and the treble and the highs and the mids are kind of low. So a good graphical representation of what is happening with my baseline and where to decrease it, where to increase it, maybe if I want to take something down, where do I want to take it down from. You can also pause the whole spectrum so that I can always take a look at it later and see what's happening. And probably this is like a little red, so see if I can decrease this, and if it's a good frequency or a bad frequency, or like if I want to increase it. Right. You also have a drive bit for the whole EQ. You have an output gain knob, and you also have a really cool thing, which is a hardware saturation knob. It adds a little bit of warmth again to the sound which you're using. Let's see how it sounds. There's almost a certain kind of a heaviness in the low frequency band, which I can tell because of this. And I really like this, although I don't use this too often because the preamp kind of takes charge of this aspect for me. But yep, you also have a couple of meters which has the in and out meter. So if you're pushing out a little more volume than what you're getting in, you can just see. You can also see the stereo width of the whole thing. Right. And finally over here you have a few more settings which we're going to take a look at. So you have the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, which is 8 different presets which you can make for the same sounds, and then probably compare between which one's sounding good. For example, we have the A versus B. So you can also quickly do a A/B. And this is really helpful when you are kind of confused between which settings might work for your track or a sound and which ones won't work. So you can quickly comparatively analyze that which ones probably will work. Apart from this, you also have the mid side, or the mid only, or the left and right only, and also a surround sound processing for the whole track, which is quite cool to come in a free tool. We also have a oversampling up till a very big number, but I think in the free version it's only up till 2x, which is still cool, but because we have 96 kilohertz of oversampling, which is quite too much. 1x is also pretty fine, but 2x is something which you can always look for. You have an inbuilt limiter so that you don't hurt your ears even if you're peaking too much. And finally, you have something really cool again, which is the AGC, automatic gain compensation, which I really like. If I'm boosting something too much, it automatically compensates the gain of the remaining frequencies for me, so that again these things don't peak and I don't hurt my ears. So I can literally just go haywire with the whole spectrum and I'll still be fine. But if this was not there, then probably I'll be dead by now. So, or my ears will be bleeding. So really useful feature here. And finally, you also have a set of mapping here, so that you can make triggers, switches, or like basic LFOs and automations over here. So quite cool of a EQ, and again my go-to EQ apart from using EQ3 and EQ8 by Ableton, which are also pretty cool. But this is my go-to, and there are a few presets to start off from. You can also save your presets, and you can also randomize to generate like a preset from here, which is quite cool again. Bypassing is also there, and yep, that's kind of it. And let's move on to the next one then. Okay, so here we are on the final thing, after which we just have the sidechain, which is something which I can wrap it up in this one itself. So we're going to talk about the compressor, and I'm going to take an example of the drums or the hi-hats which we have here. So this is how it sounds. Right. And the first thing is that in the compression rack, I have two different kinds of compressors. Both of them have their own distinct kind of features and operations. So the first one being a digital compressor, which is by Meldaproductions again, called M compressor, which I think is Melda compressor, but just gonna say M compressor. Right, so the main job of this is to transparently lower down the dynamic range, and that's kind of it. The best part is you have an in meter, a out meter here, a side meter here, the gain reduction meter here. There's a lot you can do, and finally all the settings which you saw in the EQ, they are present in this as well. So they are all present here as well. So let's take a look at how it kind of works. You can see there's a gain reduction knob which is kind of acting pretty well right now, and we have a ratio of 1.8:1. I'm just going to change that to a 4:1 and keep the knee size, or let it be hard or soft maybe. Yeah, let's see how it kind of pans out. So we are losing a lot of transient here, so I'm just gonna increase the attack. So very soft kind of compression. If I even squash the whole sound, let's see how it sounds. You can see even though I have over compressed everything, it's like almost like a 10 decibel of compression. It kind of sounds soft. It's not too, getting squashed too much. Let's get it further down and see what happens. Almost there, and we still are good to go. It doesn't sound too bad, but I don't recommend going till there because again, it's your choice, but the dynamic range will become zero almost, and you won't have fluctuations of volumes going up and down, which won't create like a nice rhythm. I want sometimes things to be like very loud, and not very loud, but like loud and then soft, loud and then soft. That kind of creates like a nice and impactful rhythm, rather than just everything on the same volume levels, which is what we are not doing here. So the compressor itself is very transparent and acts pretty well, as you can see. Right. You also have an option to maximize to 0 decibel, which is quite cool if you are, going in a very pre-master, sending out a pre-master to a label or something. So you can just quickly do this and glue everything up and, just send it out. Apart from that, you have this cool thing to make a custom shape, which is something which I don't find too often. So that is pretty cool. You can create a custom shape for the compressor and then let that work for you. Right, so that's kind of it. There's the first one, and the final one is LA2A's emulation called LALA by Analog Obsession. Really love this one. It has a fixed ceiling or a fixed threshold level, and there are only 2 of these knobs which you need to work for the compressor. And also there's a mix knob, which is the dry and wet Apart from this is the EQ section, which you don't really have to go for if you're just going for compression. You can also see the meter here, which will tell you how much compression that has happened. So in LA2A, the thing is that, or LALA, the thing is that attack and the release, also the threshold is set to a standard level, and you cannot, change those things. There is this knob called peak reduction, which is used to do the compression. What you can do is you can keep increasing the level of the signal until it touches the threshold, and right after it starts going above threshold, it starts getting compressed down. That's how the compressor works. The thing about it is that it's a very transparent compressor. Again, the point of using this compressor chain is to have precise compression and not adding too much color to the whole sound. And I just need to reduce the dynamic range. That's what I want to do, and rather than adding something like a dirt or something of a flavor which can bring out the sound a little more. If I want to do that, I'll probably use a different tool for that, but I don't really require that to do here. So let's take a look at this here. You can see that it's almost touching like a -3 decibel of compression or gain reduction, and then I'm adding another 3 decibels over here. And it doesn't sound too bad, everything's fine. Very transparent, it's bringing out a lot of lower signals up, because of the fact that we don't hear any sort of squashing here as well, and everything's perfect. You can click on the analog obsession icon, by the way, to enable the oversampling in this one. And yep, let's try out this whole compressor on my master, and I'll probably make a different video on the master channel how I used other tools to prepare a pre-master track. But let's take a listen to the whole track with this. So that's kind of it. We also have the sidechain right after everything, so that we can quickly sidechain things to kick or like anything else if you're required to do that. And that's kind of it. This is the whole thing about how I use my particular rack or like a new MIDI track whenever I open, what all things are there, and now you know why I particularly use certain things. Finally, I have a few words that probably this video might have been useful, might not have been something which you were looking for, but I would recommend you going and experimenting with the kind of style and the plugins or the tools or the stock plugins which you and your genre demands, and don't probably try to have the same sort of setup for everything, because it might not work out for you if it's working out for me. Try to find something which kind of resonates with you, which brings out a lot of kind of quality character to your tracks, rather than just using certain things from here and there. And yeah, that's kind of it, and I'll wrap up this video with this one, and I'll see you soon probably. Cheers.